Billy, you've written a lot of compositions, I know, I've noticed, and could you tell us a little bit about what you've written?
Well, I don't know. It's rather difficult to classify. I just write something that sounds good. I hope it sounds good anyhow. And I don't bother to classify it.
Genius is a word I seldom use here because it's one of those words that social media has worn farcically thin. However, rare and genuine genius casts a deep and enduring shadow. And while genius is rare, it is seldom solitary, and in those bare handful in whom we recognise it, there is so often a network of collaborators who stand either willingly or unwillingly in the shadow of giants. One of the undoubted geniuses of American popular music, perhaps the foremost amongst them, is Edward Duke Ellington. In a near 50-year career, he took jazz to places that no one had before or ever dared to since, incorporating ambitious compositional elements, much as his close contemporary and fellow rare genius George Gershwin did, writing songs that became staples of the great American songbook, much as Gershwin did as well, and propelled those into public consciousness by building bands that showcased some of the greatest talent ever assembled in the same place at the same time on an American stage. Much as I would like it to be, however, this is not the story of Duke Ellington, but of one who worked brilliantly, productively, and most of all gladly in the Duke's enormous shadow, the incredibly gifted Billy Strayhorn. Billy Strayhorn is one of the great architects of American music. I choose the word architect very deliberately. Strayhorn was himself supremely gifted. He wrote around 1,000 pieces, songs, suites, scores, movie soundtracks, his work on anatomy of a moves and dance pieces, both his own and in collaboration with his all but constant employer and undeniable best friend, Duke Ellington. Ellington planned great cities of music and he populated them with his boundless ideas. Strayhorn worked more intimately, building beautiful houses for those ideas which brought them to life. Ellington wrote an eloquent text on American music from 1924 to 1974, and for half that time he had Strayhorn to finish his sentences for him. Ellington called him my right arm and my left arm and the eyes in the back of my head. And what marvellous work they did together. Strayhorn was Ellington's maid of all work, arranger, composer, pianist, co-writer, and conduit for outlier influences. He crafted, constructed harmonies, polished, played on and oversaw 27 US top 30 pop hits with 4 US R&B number ones. Songs including all-time classics like Coco, Flamingo, I Got It Bad and That Ain't Good, Don't Get Around Much Anymore, Perdido, A Slip of the Lip, Sentimental Lady, I'm Beginning to See the Light, Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me, and I Ain't Got Nothing But the Blues. He also wrote the theme tune, which Ellington's band would have played easily 2,000 times. The quite un-Strayhorn-like Take the A-Train, detailing Ellington's instructions on how to get from Greenwich Village to his house in Harlem, as well as now standards such as Sea Jam Blues, Main Stem, My Little Brown Book, Satin Doll, Chelsea Bridge, Lush Life, Daydream, Something to Live For, Lotus Blossom, A Flower is a Lovesome Thing, and as he lay dying in hospital from throat cancer, the surprisingly jaunty Upper Manhattan Medical Group. Strayhorn was also Ellington's credited collaborator on many of his more ambitious suite-based works, such as A Drum is a Woman, The Queen's Suite, and the superb Such Sweet Thunder. He probably wrote countless others, but Ellington could be notoriously stingy with credits. He once said of Strayhorn to an audience while taking the applause after a show, "You know, Strayhorn does the real work. I just come up here and take the bows." While Ellington doubtlessly exploited Strayhorn, who from time to time chafed under the lack of credit and expressed unease or dissatisfaction, doubtless Strayhorn considered the benefits of his relationship with Ellington to outweigh the slight, and perhaps also for the shy Strayhorn, the absence from the spotlight was not entirely unwelcomed. From Ellington, Strayhorn did receive some very important considerations. Most importantly was affirmation of his talent. As a scrabbling musician in Philadelphia, blocked out of his preferred career in the then all-white world of classical music, to be lifted out of obscurity by one of the greatest figures in American popular music must have been tremendously validating. He met Ellington by talking his way backstage after a show, engaging Ellington in conversation and basically telling him everything he thought he was doing wrong. Ellington admired his moxie and invited him to his home to demonstrate some songs. It's on the journey there that he wrote Take the A-Train. He was also provided with access to a world and a mode of work which was sympathetic to his character and conducive to following his proclivities and curiosities. A frequently lonely figure, Strayhorn lived a life driven by sensitivity, devoted to his pursuit of beauty, love, and an impeccable aesthetic. As a gay African-American jazz musician, he soon learned the latter two communities were seldom at peace with the former. But in Ellington, his polar opposite in personality, he found a father figure and a man who could give him the basis of a world in which he could live and work. Ellington forbade any teasing of Strayhorn by his band, and they came to regard him with genuine respect and affection, nicknaming him Wheelie and becoming the family that circumstances had denied him in Philadelphia. His relationship with Ellington and the leeway and sympathy Ellington afforded him allowed him to blaze a quiet trail through a world that would have been closed to him, and his experience in that world came back to Ellington in spades through the music. As I mentioned, Take the A Train is atypical for Strayhorn, being as it is riffy and hooky and very much of the big band style of the day. Strayhorn's musical fingerprint was rich harmonic progression, frequently wandering from key centres via dramatic shifts and imaginative chromatic. One of his most famous compositions, Lush Life, wanders from its home key of C sharp almost immediately, taking those bold chromatic steps out of key. It immediately shifts through F7, B major 7, and B flat 7. Quick little musical lesson, chromaticism is where a composer borrows notes from outside the scale he's using to shake things up a bit. Lush Life is in C sharp major, so ordinarily Strayhorn has C sharp, D sharp, F, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and C to use in his chords. But the F7 pinches A natural, B major 7 appropriates B natural, and B flat 7 D natural. Notes not in the C sharp major scale. He propels it forward through a series of added 7 notes which are resolved in the next chord, usually as the harmonically critical third note. But he also uses more exotic extensions to give the music a sense of shifting harmony and chords sounding more dense. No wonder John Coltrane was drawn to both Lush Life and Strayhorn's music as a whole. There are so many unique points for departure. His music frequently invokes melancholy or a crepuscular feeling. Strayhorn once said, with a keenly attuned sense of poetry, and Strayhorn did generally write his own lyrics, that everything in life that happened should happen halfway to dawn. That's the feeling his music brings. The music was heavily influenced by French Impressionist composers, Ravel and Debussy amongst others. Chelsea Bridge is a prime example. It seems to swirl in mist, its parallel melodies cascading over each other as soloists take turns with this knotty melody. Satin Doll has a gentle swing to it, but there's a sadness, a yearning in the melody. Isfahan, for Ellington's Far East Suite, is considered by the Penguin Guide to Jazz to be the most beautiful piece of work Strayhorn and Ellington ever did. Ellington appears to have appropriated the credit here a little. Strayhorn actually wrote it 4 years before Ellington recorded it. Lotus Blossom sways seductively, its intricate piano part shielded under a twisty melody. And while he preferred gentle swing or rubato textures, rubato is where music slightly shifts tempo to emphasize particular sections, to rhythmic intensity, his music could get down too. Imagine My Frustration, a bold and brassy blues, gets a spectacular treatment by Ella Fitzgerald in her 1965 collaboration with the Duke. Strayhorn had written a suite of music for Ella on her 1957 Sings the Duke Ellington Songbook album and played the piano on it. The sprightly Johnny Come Lately was a staple for the Ellington Orchestra. My Little Brown Book, with its wistful tune, was as melancholic and suffused with smoke and starlight as his best work. As he went on with Ellington and they began to expand into more ambitious suites of music, Strayhorn became the modernist edge to Ellington's neoclassicist leanings. He introduced bitonality, where different parts are written in different keys to produce particular effects, tension, trance-like sections, and troubled, unresolved parts. He began to introduce sharper degrees of dissonance, such as tritones, which are chords composed of 3 major intervals, or the use of diminished fifths, which is a favourite of bands like Black Sabbath. And later, as he struggled with health and mortality, his music went back to a more sentimental ground, recounting a life lived without regret or shame or bitterness. And, as it is wont to do with the good, death came too soon to the man. Throat cancer claimed him in 1967, ending a near 30-year career of challenges unshirked and a body of work distinctive and uniquely valuable. Right to the end he was writing. Blood Count, later an Ellington standard, and UMMG are both considered amongst his finest works, and they were composed literally on his deathbed. Billy Strayhorn was 51 years old. The quiet, studious Strayhorn, for all his formidable, unique and indispensable gifts, seemed to typify in being shadowed by the brilliant, gregarious and shamelessly self-publicising Ellington, an exemplar of those not counted in the classic canon's great man narrative. He is, by the very dint of his prodigious and wonderful body of work, the man who stands in stark opposition to that great man narrative. However, as death came to Billy Strayhorn, so did the tributes. From a world grateful for song, from a community grateful for a dignified, productive presence, and from the African American people proud of a strong ambassador. Today, the full scope of Strayhorn's work now, as it's being picked apart from Ellington's, is being reassessed and marvelled at for its diversity, its complexity, and its ability to both viscerally and psychologically communicate joy. The finest tribute to him, of course, came from Ellington, who, devastated by his old friend's death, recorded a beautiful impromptu version of Lotus Flower, with his band audibly packing up in the background, lost in a private reminisce for his best friend and artistic foil, for inclusion on a tribute album entitled And His Mother Called Him Bill. Ellington also spoke the eulogy at Strayhorn's funeral. He spoke English perfectly and French very well, but condescension did not enter his mind. He demanded freedom of expression and lived in what we consider the most important and moral of freedoms. Freedom from hate, unconditionally. Freedom from self-pity, even throughout all the pain and bad news. Freedom from fear of possibly doing something that might help another more than it might help himself. And freedom from the kind of pride that can make a man feel he was better than his brother or his neighbour. Billy Strayhorn, one of the great, yet somehow improperly acknowledged, masters of American music.